Geoff Schwartz joins us now. Geoff, what's your New Year's Eve plans?
Nothing.
Yeah. What time do you think you'll go to bed?
10 or 11 probably.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's no point to stay up tonight. I mean, is there a good bowl game tonight? I don't even know. And then, my wife works. She works 13 hours today. Like, there's nowhere to go afterwards. I think we might just have like a date night, like sit on the back porch together and like hold hands for a few minutes. I don't know. We're gonna try to do something. I don't even know.
We were just having a conversation, and you're on the spot here. But if you had to go back in time to December 31st, 2019, right? And you had to tell yourself about the upcoming 2020 year, what do you think would be the most jarring and shocking part of 2020? And I'll give you a couple of examples that the guys had. Mine was like, hey, I'm going to go to NFL games, but the vast majority of the seats are going to be zip tied and everybody will have to be wearing masks, right? Like if I had to go tell myself that, on December 31st, 2019, it'd be like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. Was there any moment in time, like when you think back and you're like, if I had tried to explain to this myself on December 31st, 2019, that it would have been like unfathomable almost that this is the situation that exists?
I mean, I think that I went to the Super Bowl this year. The Super Bowl was this year.
Right.
We went
I know. Yeah. I was down in Miami. Yeah.
Super Bowl, we went to parties.
Yes.
We did everything. And then 3 weeks later, I was in Mexico on vacation and worried if I was allowed to come back in the country.
Right.
We were like, they're going to let us back in. And I think the idea of not seeing people, not being able to do things, not being able to go out. I haven't really done anything besides stay in my house. I mean, we've been to the beach a couple times. I go to the gym, but I think for me, it's the lack of travel. I used to travel a lot.
Yeah.
And you just not do anything. Now, I pretty much don't do anything anyways, so I just travel. So it's not like I missed out on a lot, but I think that the lack of traveling. I mean, my wife and I travel a bunch, and we haven't been able to do very much of that this year. And yeah, it's been and it doesn't even feel like New Year's because tomorrow's the same thing. There's no change of life because it's 2021 tomorrow.
Here's one thing I will say on an incredible positive. I think we're vastly underplaying how incredible it is that the NFL managed again, I feel like you have to say knock on wood every time you say anything. But in theory, the NFL is going to play every single game. Every team is going to play, and they're going to do it in the regular 17-week season. That's an unbelievable accomplishment to me. When you think about all the different difficulties of playing football games, the travel, the COVID-related issues, and yes, the Denver Broncos not having quarterbacks, and last week, the Browns didn't have their wide receivers, and there certainly are going to be guys that are able to play and not able to play. But for the NFL to manage to get the entire season in 17 weeks is one of the most incredible accomplishments I may have ever seen in sports. Because remember, the NBA had to do it inside of a bubble. Major League Baseball played a fraction of their overall schedule. Same thing with the NHL, also doing it in a bubble. The NFL is going to do their exact normal schedule, and every game is going to get played.
Yeah, and it's interesting because people bash the NFL
That's right.
for trying to play through this and trying to kind of ram their way through the season. But my contention was always that the NFL spent the money needed, right, on testing, on contact tracing, on those devices to track where you've been in the facility. They spent the money on the scientists and doctors to figure out the exact time. People have knocked the NFL for their idea that the exposure time, the contact tracing is 15 minutes. I think it's 10 to 15 minutes within 6 feet of someone without a mask on, right? They determine that is kind of their period for what they consider a close contact, and then even then it's 5 days of quarantine, not 14 days, right? So they kind of they had their own way to do this, which is different than kind of the CDC, but it's worked, right? We have not seen a lot of breakouts besides the Ravens and the Titans as far as just entire teams getting COVID, and so it has worked. It has worked. We're getting to the playoffs, obviously. It should work in the playoffs, but I think that NFL players and coaches and personnel deserve credit too, because they've gone out of their way to limit, their outside interactions, to make sure even the spouses, right? The spouses can't go out, they can't do things, and can't bring COVID in the house and get their husbands or anyone who works in the facility sick. So everyone deserves credit. They've done a marvelous job of this, and hopefully this weekend we get all our games in, and we get a playoffs, and we have a Super Bowl winner in February.
We're talking to Geoff Schwartz. You can follow him on Twitter at Geoff Schwartz. Your brother starts on the Kansas City Chief offensive line. How nervous should Chief fans be about the last 7 weeks or so of the season? Or do you think the Chiefs are going to flip a switch and they're a prohibitive favorite to win another Super Bowl?
Well, I think they're still the favorite to win. I mean, I bet on them to do it. But the thing that worries me about the Chiefs is if you look at last season. So last season, they were ascending when they hit the playoffs. So if you look at the last 5-6 weeks of the season, they were blowing teams out like 40-9, 23-3. They went to New England and still beat a 12-win New England team. They beat the Chargers, I think, in week 17. And yeah, they got some breaks. The Dolphins beat the Patriots, kind of helped them out a little bit there. But they were ascending. Their defense was playing really well. And kind of right now they're descending, right? Their offense has not been – look, the standards for offensive performance in Kansas City are very high. So their standard is higher than other teams, but they're kind of, they're descending. Their offense is not playing as well lately. Mahomes does not look quite the same. You mentioned the offensive line. My brother's been out for like 2 months, and it's noticeable. Their offensive line is just not as good as it's been in the past. And look, defensively, their defense, their numbers aren't great, but they don't allow a lot of points. It kind of worries me when you're 32nd in the red zone. When it comes playoff time, you play better teams, that typically catches up to you. So luckily for them, I think there's only one team in the AFC that can beat them, and that's Buffalo.
Yep.
And what happens is when you play these style of games where you just kind of squeak by, it kind of gives you a false sense of confidence that we can just always win these late games. So yeah, when you play the Falcons and you play the Raiders and you play, now I forgot who they play. Like when you play these teams that aren't as good, you can do that, right? But when you play Buffalo, you can't really do that. But I will say, the Chiefs this year have won at Tampa, at New Orleans, at Buffalo, at Baltimore. Like they've won a lot of big games on the road. I mean, like they're a good football team. So the question is whether or not if you kind of go into a game against Buffalo and you think, okay, we'll just come back at the end of the game or we'll win a close game, that's where it can catch up to you. So I think the Chiefs are going to be fine, but Buffalo would be the only team that worries me.
Would you rest your guys if you were a head coach and you're Mike Tomlin or you're Sean McDermott or Andy Reid or whoever it is, basically when your team is slotted and you know roughly where they're going to be, would you rest your guys for the final game of the season?
So, it's interesting. Playoffs. I've been on a team that did that in 2013 with Andy Reid in Kansas City. We rested everyone week 17, and we came out in the playoffs. And we put up it's the famous Clay Travis text me before the game's over game.
Yeah, for people who don't know, you guys were up big on the Colts, and I was like, oh wow, I was watching that game, and I texted you like halfway through, hey, congrats on getting a playoff win, and then you guys like gave up. What was your lead in that game?
We were up 38-10 in the third quarter.
Yeah, 38-10. That's about time I texted you when you were up 28 in the third quarter, and then you guys lost that game.
So we played fine offensively. I mean, that's what people worry about, right? Is that offensively you're gonna show Andy Reid. He did this in 2017. He's done this forever. He's not going to play Pat Mahomes this weekend. I actually think that they rest everyone. Like he doesn't strip. He doesn't even dress the veterans. He just lets them sit out the entire week. Pittsburgh had to do this for a couple reasons. One is they didn't get a proper bye this week, right? A proper bye is obviously missing the game Sunday, but no practice, and they had to practice through their bye week because they may or may not have played that weekend. So It makes sense to rest the starter. Sean McDermott's an interesting one because a lot of people will argue, hey, Buffalo's hot. Why don't you just keep playing and stay hot in the playoffs? Yeah, I get that, but I also get Miami Dolphins defense having to win this game, just blitzing the heck out of Josh Allen and just hitting him all game, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's not worth it. You pretty much have the 2 seed locked up. You have the tiebreaker against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's probably going to lose this weekend. You have to kind of assume that. I think Josh Allen plays no more than a half in this game, and then they just kind of sit him out. So I think resting guys is probably the way to go. I've been in that spot. It feels great to rest, and it's kind of a reward for a long season. I would do it. McDermott's the only one I don't know if he will do it the whole game. I think he'll start Josh Allen for a half or a quarter.